Hey, my name's Christopher. Welcome to my house. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about kind of some new developments that we've got going on here at the winery as winter has finally started to set in, noticeable by the snow that fell today, and the fact that we are definitively wrapping up harvest right now. It is time to finally get some wine out to you guys to sort of tuck into the winter with. So, wanted to tell you about a couple of new wines that we've got coming out and a couple of fun things that. Or some stuff that at least we're excited about. So, first and foremost, we're going to actually be sending out the last vintage Riesling that we have made. So 2014 is kind of going to be sort of the end to the first couple of years that we started working with this grape. Grape that I basically started this winery because of my love of, and ultimately over time started to realize it really wasn't kind of hitting the mission that we wanted. In terms of sort of changing the way that we and I think the world looks at Finger Lakes wine. So we've been kind of slowly working our way through, taking time to sort of let these wines develop and evolve and kind of see what happened with them with longer time on lees or longer time in tank and eventually longer time in bottle. So 2014 is going to be our current release of Riesling, and it's a wine that we're really excited to share. It's very similar in its like structure to the 2009, so our first vintage with Riesling, and in many ways kind of juxtaposition against say, the 2010. This vintage is super lean, it's crisp, it's linear, it's tight, it's fresh and bright. And ultimately, I think the wine is just evolving absolutely beautiful. It's kind of like leesy, cheesy aspect to it, but beautiful crisp acid and bright, fresh, crunchy character to it. With this, that'll be essentially kind of wrapping up the basic, our sort of Riesling program. And then another wine I wanted to introduce you guys to is our 2014 Cabernet Franc. Wine that continues to be, for me, one of my favorite grapes to work with here in the Finger Lakes. And ultimately, really sort of, I would say, almost the core of our winery in many cases. So Cabernet Franc just does super, super well. And the 14 vintage for me is a little bit of a return in style. For me, it's a little bit more similar to, say, the 2012 or even the 2010 Reserve. A wine that I think has absolutely delicious sort of stuffing right now. Really round, really balanced, really elegant, but also has really long lifespan ahead of it, which ultimately, again, is kind of at sort of the core of our goals and our ideas here. And then moving from there, another new sort of basically it's an adaptation of a concept that we've been working on since the beginning, which really is kind of what began as our red table wine. Ultimately, it's the idea that pretty much everything that we do at Element is so focused on varietal and really trying to define varietal specificity here in the Finger Lakes, that we wanted to make a wine that sort of took varietal out of the picture as well, and ultimately left us not with a picture of a grape, but with a picture of a place, and ultimately a place and a time. So with everything else, we really strive so much for varietal identity in our Cab Franc or our Pinot or our Syrah or Merlot. But with the red table wine that we started producing, it was ultimately about really trying to define what made that vintage in this place unique. And that's really what started it back in 2010. We have are just kind of wrapping up the last of the 2012s, and wanted to bring out a new, essentially a new vintage of this product. So the sort of twist to it is that we're just like we oftentimes do, just changing the name on something for absolutely no reason at all. So ultimately in 2013, we stopped calling it Red Table Wine and started calling it The Element. This, much like the 2012, is a blend of Cab Franc and Syrah, with a couple of other little blenders in there, little dashes of this and that. But ultimately, for me, it really represents this really kind of unique growing season that we had in 2013. And I think ultimately, even more so, really kind of reflects the things that we learned from the 2011 growing season, and really starts to kind of represent a tightening in the way that we were doing things, and sort of a focus, and a real sort of attention to detail that we'd started to develop at this point. So I think this wine is showing really beautiful. Kind of the idea of it is that it always sees a little bit longer élevage, so we hold this back both in bottle and in barrel a little bit longer. Trying to make essentially a wine similar like Rioja Gran Reserva, where it's sort of delivered to the market ready to go, and where ultimately the aging and the development and the integration of this wine has already happened when it comes out. So we've held this wine back now for 6 years, before we really felt it kind of hit that point. So really excited to bring this out, and I hope you guys like it as much as I do, because I mean the 12 has just been stunningly delicious, and watching that wine continue to evolve in bottle really sort of kind of secured my belief in what we were doing with this. And I really like this blend of Syrah and Cabernet Franc. I think it's something that's kind of unique, and not something that has a real history to it. It's not, a Bordeaux blend, or it's not a Rhone blend. It's sort of, for us, it's kind of ultimately a Finger Lakes blend, which I guess is really sort of what we're shooting for with that. And those really kind of wrap up kind of what I consider our core items. Ultimately, it's, Riesling, Pinot, Syrah, Cab Franc, and the Element have really become kind of the center of what we do every year. But as part of our idea of continuing to drive the Finger Lakes and continuing to try and develop, and ultimately trying to continue to refine not only what we do, but identify what we could be doing, and try to really push and make sure that we don't rule things out just because they haven't been done before. So while those sort of represent our core bottlings, we always have this sort of ongoing, evolving, revolving kind of workshop projects that we go by. And so we're always trying to experiment with either new vineyard sites or new grapes, maybe some new winemaking techniques and things like that are in much, much smaller quantity, but ultimately, hopefully, are really kind of going to give way to influencing either a long-term core item or kind of the way that we make all of our wines. And so with that in mind, we're really excited there we go, to bring out the 2016 Blaufränkisch. A grape that's also known as Lemberger, historically would have been known as Lemberger here, quite associated with Austria at this point, though really its origins are in Hungary, where it would be called Kekfrankos. Blaufränkisch is a grape that is really showing its potential here. Much like Cabernet Franc, it tends to do really well in our winters, but also produces these kind of dark berry flavors and this kind of lifted floral note. And this will be the third vintage, and ultimately also probably the last for a while, that we're going to make a Blaufränkisch. So the 2013, this is much more for me similar to that style. If you've tasted the 13 and the 15s before, the 13 was all about flowers. It was just like, for me, one of the most floral red wines I'd ever smelled. Really elegant, really kind of sexy, delicate, balanced. Whereas the 15 was much more kind of powerful, much more brutish, black fruit and spice and aromatics like that, pepper and things. 16 really sort of turns back that kind of style that we saw in 2013. It's more floral, it's more delicate, it's more elegant, it's a little bit lighter, it's a little bit leaner. And I think it's a really kind of cool wine. So if you get the opportunity to taste them side by side, for me, it's really a sort of evolution of both vintages, but also winemaking styles. And while they came from the same farm, they did come from different blocks of that farm. So we kind of get to taste these different things happening across them, and different age vines actually as well going with that, different blocks. So that's kind of what we've got coming your way. Really excited to be sending these wines out to you. Hopefully we get them out in time for you to have them for Thanksgiving. If not, they'll be great for Christmas. That's it. Thank you so much.